St. Louis Fire Chief says our region is not prepared for an oil train derailment and it could wipe out an entire neighborhood.
Fox Files investigator Chris Hayes is here now with what's being done to protect you from the growing oil pipeline on our rails. Chris.
Shirley and Elliot, you might not have noticed the last time a train passed. Maybe you were at a game downtown. Trains have become such a part of the background, but the cargo has changed dramatically and emergency responders are worried.
It's a moving pipeline. It's along these rails, and it's going through neighborhoods all across the city and the state.
Michelle Minden lives in Holly Hills, where about 2 years ago she joined neighbors in a group called St. Louis for Safe Trains.
This was a life or death issue. I mean, if one of these trains were to derail, we would all be gone.
After this oil train derailment and explosion in Quebec, Canada,
oh my God!
The St. Louis Fire Department created a map to show what it would look like in Holly Hills. A similar explosion would destroy hundreds of homes.
Almost the entire half of Holly Hills would be gone, including a school that's just a couple blocks away from us right here.
That wasn't exaggerated at all. I was involved with developing what the fallout would be.
Fire Chief Dennis Jenkerson says his men and women could not handle it.
One tanker we can handle. When you start looking at 100 of them coming through this neighborhood where I've got, 75, 80,000 people, I got a problem.
Hours after our interview, nearly 100 oil train cars rolled through downtown St. Louis, right past Busch Stadium, along the interstate, and under the arch grounds. They appear to be returning north to get more oil.
They are residual cars, which means they could have 10% of product in that car. So a 30,000-gallon tanker, got 3,000 gallons of product probably left in there. Problem, you got vapors, and with vapors coming off this new product, there's a big issue there. They're all flammable. It's
part of the new oil boom out of the Bakken Formation in North Dakota. Chief Jenkerson says Bakken oil is being fracked faster than anyone can prepare for.
It's a different animal. It's shipped under the crude oil DOT regulation, but it's not. It's a younger oil. It's a sweet oil. They call it a sweet crude. It's got high ends in it, which it contains 10 times the amount of propane, butane, pentane, hexane, which is highly volatile products.
Through St. Louis, the Terminal Railroad Association inspects the tracks constantly, sometimes using X-ray technology that can detect problems inside the steel. Special train cars look for erosion and possible rail issues, and inspectors examine bridges.
Make sure there's all the, the bolts are working and there's no cracks in the steel.
Terminal Railroad Chief Engineer Eric Field says they're looking at big structures like the downtown MacArthur Bridge almost daily, and they're acting when needed.
Steel repair is a huge part of what we do. MacArthur Bridge is the second longest bridge over the Mississippi River, has a lot of structural steel. We do steel repairs constantly.
Before this interview, we walked underneath, finding lots of corrosion. Then this, which really seemed to stand out. It's a ground support with so much corrosion, it appears the walls of the support are bending in. We sent pictures to Terminal Railroad. About a week later, they showed us this repair. Field says inspectors identified it long ago and they were watching it.
It was a concern that it came up on an audit finding, and we have a lot of bridge to maintain and we rank and prioritize it, but it fell into an intermediate category of repair, and it was repaired within, I believe, 3 or 4 years since it was this first audited.
Historically, the railroads have been fairly safe.
Chief Jenkerson says they have a great track record. But he says there's a reason we've seen nearly 10 oil-related derailments since the explosion in Quebec 2 years ago. Accidents happen.
We need product. We need foam. That's how we got to put this. Should something happen, this is what I'm going to need. We've got enough foam to put out a tanker car or two. So we've been working with them trying to get some of their products here so we can keep them on site in the region. Not just for the city of St. Louis, but for the surrounding communities that might need it.
A Union Pacific spokesman says the railroad does have nearly 300 pounds of foam right here in St. Louis and a larger amount nearby. He added they have a hazmat material manager, 2 response contractors, and air monitoring equipment right here in St. Louis.
Chris, what about the federal government? Didn't it recently mandate safer train cars?
Yes, and that's a few years along, but they're looking for thicker walls on the cars, better braking, and then the railroads say that they have spent a lot of money on improvements. The American Association of Railroads says that it's spent nearly $500 billion in the last 3 decades.
Wow. All right, we'll see what happens. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.